Good evening, DPS families. Welcome to Evenings with Family Academy, a DPS virtual class series. We are so happy that you all decided to come and share your evening with us. Know you had a lot of options, but we're certainly glad to have you here tonight. Tonight's class will be interactive video conferencing tools. And hopefully you all will enjoy this presentation and we can provide some help with your video conferencing needs. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Gregory Jones. I am the Family Engagement Coordinator for Durham Public Schools. And our team tonight consists of Althea Scriven. She is our Family Academy Project Manager. We also have Erica Fernandez, who is one of our Family Academy instructors. We have Truett O'Neill, who is a DPS Digital Communication Specialist. And we also have our presenter for the night. And our presenter is Russell Strand Poole. He is a CTE teacher at Riverside High School. And at this time, I'm going to turn over to him. I hope you all enjoy the class.
All right, good evening, parents. Thank you so much for coming out, Durham Public School families. My name is Russell Strand Poole. As Greg said, I am a teacher at Riverside High School. I teach computer science. I've been there for about 3 years now. And let's get started. So our virtual meeting platforms, we're going to talk primarily about Zoom and Google Meet today. Now, for this presentation, what we are going to ask is that you put your questions in this Google form linked right here. That link is tinyurl.com/VMPLot. This just helps us keep track of it. It's easier for me to see the questions pop up in the Google form than it is for the Facebook chat, because that can move pretty fast. And we just want to make sure that we don't miss anything tonight. So once again, that link is tinyurl.com/VMPLot. All right, so tonight, what we want to talk about is, first off, setting up for success. This is kind of like the soft skills portion of it. How can you set up your house and your to be a good learning environment for your children? We want to talk about the software, the different software that you might see in Durham Public Schools. We want to talk about how to use that software. And then we want to look at troubleshooting. We want to look at when things go wrong, what can you do to help your child? So let's start off with setting up for success. So as a teacher, it is my job to set up my classroom in a way that best helps students learn. And this means a lot. This could mean limiting distractions for my students. There's kind of a delicate balance in putting up posters that are informative, but also not distracting. And this can be a very difficult skill to learn. And so we just want to give you some tips from teachers on how to best set up your child's learning environment. So the first thing that we want to do is limit distractions. This can be difficult depending on what goes on in your household. But one of the easiest things to do is pick an area that's more quiet. So this can mean things like turning off the TV, or picking a place where you're not going to have your pets running around distracting kids, maybe away from a window where there's a lot of activity that goes on outside. Because anywhere that's noisy, any noise that is going to happen is going to distract your child from what the teacher is telling them. We also want to get rid of visual distractions. So I mentioned TVs, absolutely, but this could be something like like very loud posters that are around. It could be things like siblings jumping on the couch next to them, or small children, or even parents just moving around the room while the student is trying to learn. Any of these things can distract a child and take them away from the education that they deserve. And finally, remove toys and video games that the students play with. So things like if they're in their room, and their room might be messy. They might have a lot of their toys lying around, maybe Legos or action figures or dolls, things that they would so much rather pay attention to than their teacher who's trying to teach them math. And I mentioned video games here because just having a console in the room can be a distraction for them. Having that console, that controller sitting there can be a way that just pulls the kid away. It distracts them, and it gives them something else to focus on besides the teacher. So removing those things can be very beneficial for your child. And this can be hard, and it could be something to consider. But if you have a child who really struggles with attention, it could be a good idea to consider taking away their phone during class time. So as a teacher, I always tell my students, put your phone away while we're in class. You need to focus on what's happening here. And so that can be very beneficial. It's really easy for a child to pick up their phone and check Instagram rather than pay attention to the teacher. Now, there are some things that go along with this. For instance, if a student has technical difficulties, maybe the way that they reach their teacher is by texting the teacher, or maybe they call into the Zoom call. So it doesn't work for everyone, but it is an idea to consider. We also want to talk about making your students confident on camera. So first off, teachers want to see their students. It is incredibly hard as a teacher to teach to a bunch of black boxes with names when that's all you see. You can't tell if your students are there. You can't tell if they're paying attention. There is feedback that teachers want to get from their students. And in a classroom, I can look around, and if I see my students are lost, I can change the way I teach. I can restate things, try to clarify. But if I can't see my students, I don't know if I've actually taught them right. I don't know if they're learning. So we want to make sure that they keep their cameras on. But a lot of our students are not comfortable with this. They're not comfortable in this virtual realm. So we want to make it so that having your camera on is a privilege. It's something to enjoy rather than a requirement by the teacher. And the first thing to do is just make the scene clean. So if your child is learning in their bedroom, if that's where they have set up to learn in school, the bedroom might be messy. They might have clothes lying around. So pick up the clothes, try to clean up the room a little bit, or, if worst case scenario, just point the camera or have them face so the camera is facing a wall. So it's just the wall behind the student. Simple, easy things like that can make it a lot more comfortable for a student to be on camera. Also, try to keep your siblings off camera. I have 2 younger brothers, and if I was in virtual learning and I had my 2 younger brothers running around constantly behind me, it would be really embarrassing. I would want to make sure that I keep my camera off because I don't want my little siblings to pop up and say hi to all my class and wave, like little siblings often do. Um, and consider the idea of letting your child dress up for school. I mean, they are in school, and so many of our children take pride in the clothes that they wear and the way that they do their hair and the makeup that they put on. And there's no reason that that should stop just because we're in a virtual environment. So if your child gets a new shirt or a new outfit, they should wear it on camera. We want them to be able to show off in the same way that they would have done in school. And also make it interesting. If you have a child that has a really cool poster that they want to show off, let them show it off on camera. The only kind of stipulation here is we want to make sure that whatever they have behind them is not a distraction for everyone else in class. But I've had students who just in this week, they have like little LED strips that light up purple that light up their wall for them, or they might have a bunch of posters of musical bands behind them. One girl has dyed her hair pink, and all of this allows our students to be more confident in class, and that's what we want. We want our kids to feel comfortable in this new environment. So let's talk about the software. Let's talk about the software that you might see in Durham Public Schools. There are three different platforms that you've probably heard of. The really big one is Zoom. That's the one that everyone hears about on the news, and you might have been on a Zoom conference yourself. There's also Google Meet, which is Google's version of this virtual client. And then there's Microsoft Teams. Now, we have Microsoft Teams, but you probably will not use it. Your child will probably not use it. The fact of the matter is the students just don't have access to their Microsoft Teams accounts yet. It costs money, and so we just don't use it here. Now, so the two main platforms that you're going to see are Zoom and Google Meets. And really, to be fair, you will almost never see Google Meets. In fact, at my school, the principal came out and said, just don't use Google Meets. We're all going to use Zoom because we don't want to confuse parents and we don't want to confuse teachers. DPS just got all of their teachers Zoom Pro accounts. They're paying for it. And if we're paying for it, we want to make sure that we use it. However, like these things, these transitions take time. So if you have a teacher who was using Google Meets, that transition may take some time for them. So you still might encounter it. And also you might have a day like earlier this week where Zoom goes completely down and your kids can't get into class. The only option that we'll have is Google Meets. These things happen. It happens more frequently than we would like. So it's important to know both tools. And there are a lot of benefits to these tools. Zoom and Google have learned a lot over the past few months. I'm sure last spring you heard lots about the security vulnerabilities in these platforms. But over the past few months, Google and Zoom have taken steps to really kind of tighten down on their security. So the first thing they've done is they've encrypted communication. So all of the information that gets sent over Zoom is sent encrypted. That means that if somebody's snooping in on my Wi-Fi, they're not going to be able to see what I'm talking about. My internet provider is not going to be able to see my students. They're not going to be able to see me. They're not going to be able to know what we're talking about. Even if a student's sitting in Starbucks, nobody can snoop in on that Zoom call to try to pay attention or try to find people in the class. They're encrypted. Zoom has also password protected their meetings. So teachers can put passwords on them. And in fact, whether or not you realize it, a lot of your teachers probably already have passwords on their Zoom. It's just that password is embedded in the link itself. And this is important because a way that people were attacking Zoom calls was doing Zoom bombing is they would type in random addresses for the Zoom call and just pop into random meetings. But if the teacher puts a password on, then those people can't do that. And that's really important. Now, Google Meets has a different way of doing this. Google Meets just generates different addresses, different join codes for every meeting. So if your student's teacher is using Google Meets, the link will change from day to day. And that's a security feature. We also have waiting rooms to screen people who join. So DPS has made it mandatory. Teachers can't even turn waiting rooms off anymore. And this is important because the teacher can see who is joining the room first. The teacher can look at the waiting room, check their attendance, make sure that the student's in that class, and then let the student in or kick them out. And for instance, I had a student, it was second period of the day. I had a student from third period pop into my call. So I just said in the waiting room, I sent them a message and said, hey, you're one period early. Come back in an hour and a half. And sure enough, they left and they went to their second period class. But that feature can stop people from entering the room, people that we don't want there. And finally, the teacher can mute people and they can just remove them from the call entirely. So if a teacher lets somebody in and they start saying things that are inappropriate, then we can just mute them. In fact, in my Zoom call, I have a feature, and this is all teachers, we have features that just make it so students cannot unmute themselves. So a student can't just randomly interrupt the teacher with whatever they want to, with a song or whatnot. We can also remove the people from the call if worst case scenario. So if they're showing something on their camera they're not supposed to be, we can just kick them out of the Zoom call. And they can't come back in until we let them come back in. These features are also very accessible for parents and for students. So if you went and got a Durham Public Schools Chromebook, there is no software that you need to install. It came with the Zoom plugin, you are good to go. If you didn't, if you have a Windows PC or a Mac PC, or you even have a Chromebook, or maybe you have a tablet, your kids can just jump on and they can access the call through the browser. This is both Zoom and Google Meets. In fact, Google Meets can only be accessed through the browser. Zoom has some software you can install, but you do not have to. You can just use the browser if you want. It's available on PC, on the Mac. It's available on your cell phone if you would like. You can download a Zoom phone app. In fact, I've done this in my class where my internet on my computer dies, and so I'll just connect on my phone. And I can just have it up on my phone until my computer comes back. And worst case scenario, your students can actually call in. They can dial a Zoom number or a Google Meet number, and then they can enter the teacher's ID and they can just call in. This is really just a last ditch effort though. This is a last resort, because if a student calls in, they're not going to be able to see what the teacher is presenting. And we want to make sure that they can see everything they have to, that they can get the best education possible. So I want to check in real quick. We've gone over a bit of information. I want to see if there are any questions on that Google form. So I am looking, and I saw somebody say that their daughter keeps getting marked absent and she is in class. So I'm not sure. I hate to be honest with you, but I'm not exactly sure why a teacher would be doing that. But there are steps that you can take as a parent. So first off, the number one thing that you should do is try to contact the teacher. And when you get that phone call in the evening, that you contact that teacher and say, excuse me, but like, I think my child was marked absent by mistake. Teachers are trying to shuffle a lot of things at the beginning of class. Like I'm taking attendance, I'm setting up my screen, I'm trying to greet all of my students, I'm trying to check the Zoom call to make sure that the people coming in the room match my attendance, match my roster. There's a lot of things going on at one time, especially if like a student accidentally shows up a few minutes late and I've already taken my attendance. It can be it can be an extra step that I forget to go back to PowerSchool and put that student in. And so oftentimes it's just a quick email. I know that for students, the attendance policy has been really any contact with the teacher it counts as attendance. That counts especially on asynchronous days. On those asynchronous days, Wednesday and Friday, a student has to sign in somehow. Maybe they have a Canvas question. I have a Google form that the student has to sign on my homepage to count in attendance on those asynchronous days. And if a student doesn't do it on that day, then they get marked absent. So I know that that does happen. It's usually an error, but either contacting the teacher And if you can't get a hold of the teacher, then calling the school, and it usually gets sorted out pretty quickly. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So let's keep going. So let's talk about the basics of this software. So first off, if you're not using a Durham Public Schools computer, you may want to download the Zoom client for a PC or a Mac, and this is really easy to do. It's not necessary, mind you. If you have a Chromebook or if you have a Windows or a Mac PC, you don't have to install the client. You can use the browser if you would like. But the client comes with a little extra features, like you can there's a couple extra emojis that your student can respond with. There's a couple other things that they can do. I think they can write on the teacher's screen when the teacher wants them to, if they have the software installed. So it is a good thing to consider if you want to. So for Zoom, what you have to do is go to this Zoom link, this zoom.us/download. And on there, you're going to see quite a few different versions of Zoom to download. And the one that you want says Zoom Client for Meetings. That's the one that you need. That's the one that you download. It's a quick download, and it will allow you to use Zoom on your computer. You can still use it through the browser if you don't have it, but this is just the software. It's a different application. Remember, you do not need to do this with Chromebooks. That the Chromebooks already come with the plugin. They don't have software to install. They have a plugin that is already installed on Durham Public Schools Chromebooks. And Google Meet has no software at all, completely 100% in the browser. No software at all to install for Google Meet. Now, I want to talk about connecting. So when your child is connecting to your teacher or their teacher's classroom, when they're connecting, what they need to do is go to Canvas. Now, for your students, they can go through NC Ed Cloud. I believe they can also go through Clever. That's one of the accounts, one of the single sign-ons that we have, meaning that when the kid signs into Clever, it logs them into everything on there. So they can first off go to Canvas, and then on every teacher's homepage is the link to their Zoom meeting, is the link to their classroom. It's right on the homepage. We were all required to put it there, and so it should be there. For instance, this is a little screenshot from my homepage on Canvas. I have my contact information. I put my email, my phone number, I have the remind, and then I have my Zoom link down here. I have this Zoom link right here, so that all my students have to do is just click this link and they're instantly put into my classroom. And this is the way it should be for all of your students' teachers. All of your students' teachers have posted this on their Canvas homepage, and the student just has to click it, sign in, and they're in the class. And it's just that easy. We're also required to post this meeting ID. This meeting ID is specifically for if the student has to call in. So I'm going to talk about it a little later, but the student will call a phone number, and then they'll be asked to enter in this meeting ID, and it will put them into that call. That's really, really important to note that if you do that, you first contact the teacher. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So here we have it. So what's going to happen here is that if your child is unable to connect on the computer, something's happened, their Chromebook broke, their computer broke, your internet's out, maybe they're in the car. We don't want our students to attend class in the car. We want them to be in an environment conducive to learning, but things happen. It's gonna happen. We have to really quickly run out for an emergency. We have to bring our child along, but we still want them to be in class. So they can call in with their phone. Now on Zoom, they have to call this number right here. This is 1-312-626-6799. When they call in, they're going to be asked for their teacher's meeting ID. It should be posted there. And once they do that, they'll be put into the classroom. On Google Meet, it's just a different number. It's 1-980-999-2416. Now, Google Meets is a little different. The teacher can't post the meeting ID. Instead, when they create the meeting, they get this unique pin. This pin is auto-generated with every meeting. It's unique, and this is a security feature. So it's unique. So nobody can call in that we don't want there. But make sure that you tell your teacher that you are doing this. Make sure that you text the teacher or email them and say, hi, we're having some difficulties connecting. We have to call in today. The reason you have to do this is because when you do call in that waiting room, your name doesn't pop up. Instead, we see a phone number. And I'm not going to let that person into my call. For the safety of my students, I'm not going to let this random phone number in unless I know it is a student. So it's very important that you tell your teacher beforehand. And of course, this is a last resort. You will not be able to see what the teacher is doing on their screen. You won't be able to see the presentation the teacher is doing. You will only be able to hear them. But if you can't connect any other way, it's better than nothing. It is always better to be in class than to not be. So once we are in the meeting, there are two main things that we have to worry about. The first is going to be the mute and the stop video. Now on Zoom, this is very easy. On Zoom, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see these two buttons. You'll see the mute, the stop video, and when you click them, you get a little cross through shows you that you are muted, and then you get a little cross through on the video that shows that you are not showing your video. Google Meet, same exact thing, only with Google Meet, it's in the center of the screen at the bottom. You get the little microphone, you get the little video button, and then when you turn them off, the buttons just turn red. So same feature on both of those. That's just how you unmute yourself and stop your video. It is important to note though, like in my class, students are not allowed to unmute themselves unless I say so. So oftentimes this button will automatically be muted for the students. Now, other other tools that are very important. First off, at the bottom in the center of Zoom, you will have this little taskbar here. You'll have this participants, this chat, this share screen, and this reactions. So the participants button, what happens when you click it is you get this box over here. This can be very helpful for a teacher. For instance, you have these yes, no, go slower, go faster buttons. Your students will also have a raise hand button. So if the students can't take themselves off mute, they can click that raise hand button, let the teacher know that they have something to say. If a teacher asks a quick yes or no question, for instance, we were having difficulty getting to a website in my class, so I had to ask my students who can get to the website, who can't. And they just quickly said yes and no. And that was really good feedback for me in the Zoom call. We also have a chat where students can go in, they can ask their teacher a quick question on the chat. This is very helpful in a class. And also in this, I have the little messaging window down here where your students can choose to send the message to the teacher instead of the whole class. A lot of our students might be uncomfortable in this world. They might be shy in general. So having the ability to just ask the teacher a private question can be very, very helpful for those students. They may be embarrassed to ask a question in front of the whole class. So they don't have to here. They can just press this and they can message just the teacher. Students can also share the screen. Several teachers will have students do presentations in class, and they'll need to share their screen. They'll need to share a PowerPoint on their screen for it. And also we have this reaction. Now, I'll be honest, the reaction is not as fleshed out of a tool here, but I think they can applaud or give a thumbs up with that reaction. So maybe if there was a class presentation, the students can applaud using that reaction. Other tools. So this is Google Meet. Google Meet has a plethora of tools as well. The first tool is that you can turn on captions. So you can turn on real-time captions from Google that will caption for the student if you have one of those students who would prefer to be able to read as well as hear their teacher. But you have to be careful with this. This is a translation, just very similar to Siri or the OK Google transcription. It's not perfect. If you've ever tried to use the captions feature on YouTube, you've probably seen how it misses a few words here and there. It's the same tool there. So it's not always the best. So it's good to keep that in mind. You can also present in Google Meet. And down here we have, we can see the list of people in the class. We can also use a chat. We can use the chat in the same way that we use Zoom. And then if you press these three little dots right here, this is going to be in the bottom corner, the bottom right-hand corner of your Google Meet call. You get this menu that pops up. And in this menu, you can record the meeting. You can change the layout. So if you want to change the layout a little bit of the call, you can do that as well. It's important to note, though, that we don't want our students to spend all of their time changing the layout and not listening to the teacher. So it's good to kind of change it and then just leave it. You can also go full screen, turn on the captions here. There's the settings. It's very limited settings, but they are there. And then if you're having difficulty with your connection, you can still be on camera, you can still see the screen, but you can use your phone for audio, meaning that all of the audio will go through the phone. When you talk, it'll talk through the phone, so it'll make your connection a little better, it'll make your child a little easier to understand. You can also report a problem, report abuse, and then go to help. But the important thing to note about these is that they don't go to the teacher. If you want to report a problem, you want to communicate something with the teacher, this button won't do it. These three buttons will go to Google. So this is a problem with Google Meet. This is abuse on Google Mute or Google Meet. This is a help with Google Meet. It's not a help in class. It's not a problem in class. So it's very important to note that these three buttons will go to Google rather than the teacher. All right, so I'm going to do a quick check-in. I see one more question in that question parking lot. I haven't seen any others. This is a good one. It says, one child's profile has the parent's name upon entry. How can we change the profile name without having to rename every time? I like this because a lot of teachers, I know I require that all of my students use their full first and last name to get into my Zoom call. And so if I don't see that in the waiting room, then I don't let the child in. So you can get around this. So first off, what might be happening is that if you have the Zoom client installed, if your child is using a computer that the parent has used prior with a Zoom call, then it might be signing in with that parent's name. So what you're going to want to do is, if you have the client, you're going to want to go to like zoom.us, you're going to want to go to your preferences in Zoom and change the name on the account or log out of the account. If you're in a browser, what it does is it saves the students, or it saves the name in the browser. So you can clear the history, clear the cache on the browser, and then it will prompt the student for their name the next time they sign in on a meeting. I know for me, when I attend a meeting, it's going to be the same name every single time. And I have students that I have to go in and change their name every single time that they join. And usually clearing the history, clearing the cache on the browser will fix that. And then in the Google settings, if you have the client installed, that's where you want to fix that. There might be a more detailed answer on that, and we'll make sure to add it to our frequently asked questions afterwards. All right. So I'm not seeing any other questions just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to talk really briefly about troubleshooting. So what do you do as a parent if something goes wrong? It happens. It happened earlier this week. Something went wrong with Zoom. So what should you do as a parent to try to help your child? So these are general tips. These general tips, they apply for every meeting software that your child could use. The first thing you're going to want to do is limit the devices connected. One of the biggest problems that you're going to run into with one of these calls is your child being dropped from the call, or your child's just not being able to be heard by the teacher, or maybe you can't hear you can't hear the teacher. So the teacher can't hear you, you can't hear the teacher. It's all bandwidth. We have very limited bandwidth, so limiting the devices connected. So while your child's in school, it's probably not the best time to watch Netflix, because that's going to take a lot of bandwidth. You can, all these devices like our TV, our phones, our Xboxes, our PlayStation, all of these devices are connected to the internet. So if we can limit the amount of devices, it can really help boost the child's signal and connection to Zoom. So that means maybe not watching Netflix. Maybe that means disconnecting your phones from the Wi-Fi. All of these things can be very helpful. And I know it's hard because when I teach in my computer lab, like, we sometimes have to turn off the cell phones, turn it onto airplane mode so that the computers stop getting dropped from the Wi-Fi. It happens. Have your child move closer to the wireless router in your home. So walls really degrade Wi-Fi signal very quickly. If you have your router on one side of your house or apartment and your child's on the other side, that signal is going to degrade very rapidly going through walls. So moving your child closer to the router can be very helpful. I've had to do this. I had to buy a Wi-Fi extender for my house so that I could connect better to the router. It's at the front of the house and I'm at the back. You can also turn the video off. It's not ideal, but the video takes a lot of bandwidth. The video showing an image takes a lot of internet bandwidth. So turning it off can really allow your child to talk. And also, last but not least, worst case scenario, you can call in with your phone. And that's going to connect over the phone. It's not necessarily going to use the Wi-Fi. There's going to be no video. So it can be much better connection for your children. But once again, they will not be able to see what the teacher is doing. And you also have to let the teacher know so that their name shows up. So if you do start getting poor audio, in Google Meets, there's a couple different things you could do. So earlier I mentioned these three little dots down here that you could click in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and then you go to settings. So in settings, there's audio, but under video specifically, the first thing you can do is change the resolution. And what this means is, like, the higher the resolution, the more data it takes to send, the slower your connection's going to be, the worse your connection's going to be. So what you can do is you can change the resolution. You can lower it down to 380p so that your child's video will not look as good, but they might be able to talk better in class. You can also change the receive resolution. You can lower that down so that you can hear the teacher better. And under this setting right here, there's a number of things that you can do. You can, first off, just change the resolution. You can also make it so it only shows one video at a time. So the only thing your child will see is the teacher rather than the other students. Those videos take a lot of bandwidth, a lot of internet to show. So just limiting it to one is much easier. And then finally, we can go audio only, where there's no videos at all, so that your child doesn't show their camera, and it will make that a lot better. It will make that audio better. In Zoom, there's not as many features. There's not as many features that you can disable or settings that you can change to increase that audio quality. But there are some. So down in that bottom left-hand corner, on that video button I showed before, where normally the child would click the video to either turn on their video or turn off their video, there's this little arrow, and you can go to video settings. Under there are two settings you can work with. There is an enable HD, and there's a touch up my appearance. So this HD video, that's just going to take a lot more internet bandwidth. It's going to slow down your connection if your connection is being slow. So turning this off can be really helpful. Also clicking the touch my appearance, touch up my appearance. So this is a feature Zoom has built in to kind of make your skin look a little cleaner on camera. But it takes a lot of hardware to do that. So turning it off can be really beneficial and really helpful in those videos or in those calls. All right, so I see a couple more questions in the chat. So I want to address those really quick. So first off, this one says, can you add a virtual background in the Zoom browser? No, you cannot. It is only in the client. You can only add the virtual background in the client. And also, if you are going to add a virtual background, please make sure you check with your teacher first. Some teachers allow them, some teachers don't. It just happens, or it just has to do with the fact that people can just put any image as their background. So some teachers prefer to not allow it, and some teachers disable it entirely. It is only for the client though. What is being done about kids that are being derogatory in Zoom chats during class? It's a great question. It happens. Kids are kids. So what are we doing? So teachers still have the same disciplinary tools available to them. I know at my school, we have the ability to report behaviors like this straight to the administration when they happen. So that's first off. If we need to, we can. Secondly, we can just kick kids out of the call. We can immediately mute them. We can kick them out of the call. We can remove that student. It's a lot like a classroom. If a kid is using derogatory language in a classroom, we can have them removed from class. It's not ideal. We don't like doing that. But in a Zoom call, it's even easier because I can just click and kick them out, or I can click and mute them. It's a problem. Kids are people, and as a teacher, we have to be reactionary. And so things that we are doing, steps that we are taking is that waiting room, making sure we're not letting people in that aren't supposed to be there, putting a feature on so that students are always muted unless we allow them to unmute themselves, unless we unmute themselves ourselves. And those types of things help prevent that. And then if we have to, we can remove them, we can report them to administration. So those are the steps that we're taking to kind of remove it. Of course, it can't be 100% foolproof, but it's the same thing in a classroom where we can't stop a child from saying something that we don't want. We can only respond the best way possible. I missed this teacher's name, but he should be training. Oh, that's so sweet. My name's Russell Strands. Thank you so much. That's a very nice comment. I appreciate it. Yes, that's very kind of you. And with that, I do want to say just thank you for coming out. Thank you for spending your time with us. I know it's late. I'm sure that you've had a busy day behind you. I'm sure that whether or not you were at work or whether you were trying to manage your children in class or whatever it was that you were doing, these days are long. These are long days. So thank you so much for coming out and really trying to best support your child. It means a lot to me as a teacher to see parents come out to these and that guardians and families come out to these meetings and try their best to just support their children. So I'm going to leave it open for just a couple more minutes for questions. If you have questions, we'll be here. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Russell Strand Poole, for your presentation. And families, I sincerely hope that you all were able to gain some valuable information on particularly Zoom conference calling tool. So I just want to let you all know, first of all, again, thank you all for coming out tonight. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to come and spend a little time with Family Academy. And we're so thankful for that. I do want to remind you all about next week. Next week will be a busy week for us. We do have 3 classes. We have 2 sessions of Canvas Learning Management System. So our Tuesday class will be starting at 5:30, and that will be our English session. On Wednesday, September 2nd, we will have our Spanish session on Canvas, on the Canvas Learning Management System. Then on Thursday, a class I think that we all might need is finding the rest in stress. And I know that this is certainly a stressful time for our students, stressful time for our families, stressful time for our teachers and administrators, and also our district leaders and district personnel as well. So it's just important that we all be patient with each other and come together, because we will get through this. And we have done so much already together, and we will continue to prosper in this trying time. So we're going to find that rest and stress on Thursday, September 3rd, and that session starts at 6 o'clock. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out. And Russell, I think we may have one more question. I think we have one more question, Russell.